I was in shock. I flinched. Don't you know who I am? Don't you know who I am? That's what he said to me.
Mr. Trump hasn't responded to his latest allegations yet, but he has previously denied other similar claims made against him. We can cross live now to New York, where that news conference was held, and our correspondent Nada Tawfik. And Nada, you were listening to it. What else did she have to say?
Well, Karina, Virginia basically said that it was because Donald Trump had so strongly denied past allegations from these other women that she decided to step forward. She said it was her duty as a woman, as a mother, and as an American citizen to come forward with her story. And she said while she anticipated Mr. Trump may call her just another nasty woman, that she wanted to lend support to the other women. Now, she said at the time she was 27 in New York, coming out of the U.S. Open tournament, waiting for a car to take her home, when Mr. Trump, along with other gentlemen, were beside her. And basically, she said he made some remarks treating her as an object, saying, hey, we haven't seen her before. Look at those legs. At which point he then came closer to her, grabbed her arm, and as we heard in her describe in that clip, touched the inside of her right breast. Now, Ms. Virginia was very teary in this press conference next to her lawyer, describing how this affected the way she dressed, the way she felt about herself. And she said that actually it felt very empowering to come out and tell her story today.
Nada Tawfik from New York for now. Thank you very much for that. Well, all this comes after the last of the 3 presidential debates held in Las Vegas. During the debate, Donald Trump refused to say whether he would accept the result. Here's exactly what he had to say.
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time. What I've seen is so bad. She should never have been allowed to run for the presidency based on what she did with emails and so many other things.
But, sir, are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well, since that debate, Donald Trump has travelled from Las Vegas to the key state of Ohio, where he has been campaigning. There, he gave this clarification to his remarks.
I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters, and to all of the people of the United States, that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
Well, no sooner was the debate over than the argument over who had won got underway. A number of organisations held polls, and here are their latest verdicts. A survey by ORC and CNN gave Hillary Clinton victory, 52% to 39%. That gave her a clean sweep of all 3 debates. CBS carried out a survey in what they called 13 key battleground states. They said the final debate went to Hillary Clinton, 49% to 39% in favour. But Mr. Trump can rely on the Washington Times, which came out in his favour, 72% to 23%, or the Drudge Report, which had him on top by 75% to 25%. There is, of course, only one poll which really matters, the presidential vote itself, which is on the 8th of November. That is only 18 days away. Philip Elliott is the Washington correspondent for Time magazine. We can speak to him now. Philip, I want to get your response, first of all, to Mr. Trump saying he will accept the result if he wins.
Well, this is a very remarkable statement from a major party presidential candidate. This just flies in the face of all tradition. John McCain, who lost the 2008 campaign, is out with a statement this hour saying that it is a responsibility of a nominee to concede. That is the fundamental of America. If you lose, you have to get behind the winner, try to pull the country together, and at no other time has the nation been so deeply divided as at this moment, so close to an election with 2 candidates who really, there are no undecided voters left in this country.
His performance last night was better, though, don't you think? Will he have done enough to win over those key voters?
For the first time in this campaign, Mr. Trump actually practiced at a debate. He and Chris Christie, one of his top advisors, the New Jersey governor, actually spend some time going through, hey, here's a question, how would you answer that? It is such a novel concept for him, whereas Secretary Clinton has spent days, if not weeks, working towards this. He delivered a much better performance, but it might be too little too late. Voting is underway in several states. You mentioned Ohio, where Mr. Trump is today. Voting's underway. People are casting ballots. People have made up their minds, and there are no do-overs once you put your ballot in the box.
You say too little too late. Is it over for Mr. Trump?
Yeah, the cover of Time magazine this week is meltdown. The campaign is in a total meltdown. The Republican Party is at a moment of crisis. Many Republicans concede that the White House race is gone. The Senate is likely to go in Democrats' favor. And if Mr. Trump continues inflicting pain and uncomfortable moments on his Republican Party, the House of Representatives, which is designed not to flip until at least 2020, might tip to Democrats' favor as well.
What do you make of Donald Trump's argument that there is this silent Trump army out there that is going to turn out for him on voting day?
It may be real. We just don't know. But it's one thing to show up at a Trump rally and scream and chant and swear at the reporters assigned to cover Mr. Trump. And it's another to take the time to register to vote. In many places, it's too late to register to vote. The deadline is passed. And to show up and cast a ballot. Running for president is hard. And Mr. Trump organizationally is at a very steep deficit. Hillary Clinton has offices in pretty much every city, town, community, village, hamlet in America, whereas Mr. Trump in some of the key swing states has just a handful. He's massively outgunned on the ground, and there's no catching up at this point. No amount of money can catch you up to what Secretary Clinton has built.
Philip Elliott, good to get your thoughts. Thank you very much. Iraq's Prime Minister says the operation to recapture the city of Mosul, the last major stronghold of the so-called Islamic State in Iraq, is progressing faster than planned. IS control a large area around Mosul where 1.5 million civilians are trapped. In the past 48 hours, Iraq government forces have made significant gains to the south, while their Kurdish Peshmerga allies are advancing north and east of the city. The coalition force's highest commanding officer has told the BBC this will be a long war, but wouldn't be drawn on exactly how much longer the liberation of Mosul could take. Our correspondent Orla Girin is with Kurdish forces attacking the town of Nawaran. Here's her report.
Singing of bravery on their way into battle. Kurdish Peshmerga fighters shoulder to shoulder, knowing dawn could bring them face to face with so-called Islamic State. With first light, the Kurds began a major assault on IS positions, here just 9 miles from Mosul. The militants replied with tracer fire. Then this. A threat from above. An IS drone was over our heads. The Peshmerga tried frantically to shoot it down. A booby-trap drone killed 2 Kurdish fighters earlier this month. This one got away. Then there were 2. One was brought to earth. But IS weren't finished yet. Far from it. Suddenly, a warning. Get down, there's a sniper. As IS was pounded with heavy weapons, we managed to listen in on their communications. Here they tried to coordinate a counter-attack on the troops. Try to target them on the bridge, one commander says. Fire missiles from the petrol station. Then there's a plea for reinforcements. But IS couldn't muster any, and the assault continued. In less than 60 minutes, the village of Nawaran fell. Well, we're entering an area that the Kurdish forces have just taken. They came in about half an hour or so This village was an IS stronghold. Now, the further they go forward, the more resistance they expect to face from suicide bombers and from snipers. And we've heard some sniper fire just in the last few moments. We have to be very careful here. We have to stay on the asphalt. The troops believe that IS has spent months planting roadside bombs all around here. So they know there are many more hazards on the journey ahead. But there is now a sense here that the noose is being tightened on IS. Orla Guerin, BBC News, north of Mosul.
A smooth, constructive and orderly Brexit. That's according to those in the know in terms of what British Prime Minister Theresa May is hoping for as the UK readies itself to leave the European Union. She had her first chance to make her case to the other EU leaders on Thursday at a summit in Brussels. Officially, Brexit wasn't on the agenda, but it was the first question the journalists wanted to ask when Mrs May arrived at the proceedings.
Good afternoon. This is my first European Council, and I'm here with a very clear message. The UK is leaving the EU, but we will continue to play a full role until we leave, and we'll be a strong and dependable partner after we've left. It's in the interests of both the UK and the EU that we continue to work closely together, including at this summit.
British Prime Minister Theresa May there. So what might the other leaders at the summit be expecting? My colleague Ros Atkins spent the day in Brussels and did his best to find out.
Mr Kenny, BBC News. Mr Kenny, BBC News. Mr Schulz, Ros Atkins, BBC News. Do you think it's inevitable that the UK is going to leave the single market?
They have decided to leave the single market, and they want full access to the single market after leaving the European Union. That's only possible by accepting the fundamental rules of the European Union.
Do you accept, though, that by refusing to compromise on the freedom of movement, you're making it inevitable that there is a hard Brexit?
I don't know a compromise on the free movement, because no negotiation without notification.
Some people said the reason there will in the end be compromise is that Germany's economy is so reliant on exports to the UK. Do you think that will be an issue?
I don't know such people. With me, nobody spoke about that. Thank you.
And do you think you'll stand as the German Chancellor? Didn't want to answer that question, but that was Martin Schulz, President of the European Parliament.
Buonasera, Presidente. Buonasera.
BBC News, what are you expecting to hear from Prime Minister May this evening? Prime Minister, a question in English which can be translated. Do you think that a preoccupation with unity is preventing strong measures on migration, for example?
Доста дълга тема. Има много въпросителни върху Брекзита. За да ви го отговоря сега. Факт е, че хората, които се бореха за Брекзит, сега съвсем не могат да обяснат това, което се случва. И се надявам март месец вече да имаме някакво решение.
And what will you say to Prime Minister Theresa May over dinner? What's your message from Bulgaria to the UK?
Добре дошла отново в Европейския съюз, ще кажа. Ще ги приемем с отворени обятия.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Ros Atkins in Brussels, and he'll be back on World News, and if you're watching in the UK, on BBC News Channel at 2000 GMT with a special edition of Outside Source from Brussels. And you can, of course, follow Ros on Twitter. He's at BBC Ros Atkins. Now, I want to take you back to our top story because in the last few minutes, we have received a statement from the Donald Trump campaign following new allegations of sexual misconduct. It says, discredited political operative Gloria Allred in another coordinated publicity-seeking attack with the Clinton campaign will stop at nothing to smear Mr. Trump. Give me a break, he says. Voters are tired of these circus-like antics and reject these fictional stories and the clear efforts to benefit Hillary Clinton. That from the Trump campaign coming in the last few minutes. Now, rights campaigners in the UK have welcomed a government decision to posthumously pardon thousands of gay and bisexual men convicted of sex offences that have since been abolished. The announcement honours a government commitment made after the Enigma codebreaker Alan Turing was pardoned in 2013. He was convicted of gross indecency in 1952 and later killed himself. Those living with convictions can apply to the Home Office to have their names cleared, but some say that just isn't enough. Well, as you can see, with me in the studio is Peter Tatchell, a human rights campaigner. Some say it's not enough. What do you think?
I think that the pardon is an important, valuable step forward, but we need more. We need an apology and possibly even compensation to the men who suffered because of their conviction under unjust, discriminatory, anti-gay laws. Let's not forget that somewhere between 50,000 to 100,000 gay and bisexual men were persecuted under these laws in the 20th century. They not only went to prison, many of them, but in prison they were beaten up by fellow inmates and even sometimes by warders. They lost their jobs, their homes, they were attacked by mobs in the street, and many of them were driven to mental breakdowns, and some ended up committing suicide. So I think an apology is definitely on the cards, as well as a pardon. An apology recognises that a grave injustice was done, and a pardon is somewhat ambiguous because a pardon sort of implies, well, you did wrong, but we forgive you. In my view, and the view of many British people, gay and straight today, those men did no wrong. It was consenting, adult, same-sex behaviour. No one was harmed, no one complained. They should have never, ever been arrested.
Peter, an apology is what you want, but do you think you'll get it?
In the end, because already the apology for Alan Turing has established a precedent. You know, the government not only gave Alan Turing a pardon, but also made a public apology. And I'm very hopeful that Theresa May, keen to present the Conservative Party and her government as a liberal, modernising force, will want to go the extra step to transfer the principle that was applied to Alan Turing, the apology, to all the other men who were similarly convicted.
Peter Tatchell, thank you very much for coming in. This time yesterday, the European Space Agency was holding its breath for imminent news on whether or not it had successfully landed a craft on Mars. But 24 hours on, the agency says it still doesn't know what happened to the craft. Signals indicated the lander's mothership is now orbiting Mars. However, no signal has been detected from the craft itself. But despite the lack of a message from Mars, the European Space Agency isn't giving up yet.
The test is there to get data, to get some knowledge. And we got the knowledge, we got the data. Okay, you can say the final step to have a soft landing with communication from the surface is not confirmed so far. This is right. But I'm very happy that we have now the major goals which we try to achieve.
Let's take a look at some other news for you. A ceasefire in Yemen appears to be holding despite reports of sporadic clashes. The 72-hour truce came into force at midnight and airstrikes on the Houthi rebel-held capital, Sana'a, have stopped. The United States and South Korea say that North Korea has failed in another attempt to launch an intermediate-range missile. The latest attempt comes less than a week after a similar test. South Korean military said both attempts failed and the missiles didn't travel before exploding. For the first time, British MPs have backed calls for Sir Philip Green to be stripped of his knighthood following the collapse of his former department store BHS and a huge deficit in its pension scheme. Now, when this gorilla here escaped from his cage at London Zoo last week, armed police were summoned to help deal with the panic. But it turned out that the silverback wasn't interested in causing damage, but binge drinking huge amounts of blackcurrant cordial. Sarah Campbell has the story.
Back in his enclosure, surrounded by his family and enjoying afternoon tea. A week ago, Kumbuka was the reason visitors were locked up and armed police were called in. The 29-stone gorilla had escaped out of his den into a staff-only area. Luckily, the keeper who found him knew him well enough to keep calm.
Kombucha potted out of a door that had not been secured. The keeper just turned to Kombucha, started chatting calmly, calm down Buki, everything's fine, just as normal, no problem, and then backed away. At that point, Kombucha was just exploring the environment and just potted in to a storeroom next to his dens and was quite delighted to see some extra treats. He did take 5 litres of blackcurrant squash, but he's a big lad, 29-stone gorilla. He can cope with 5 litres of squash on a once-off basis.
The zoo insists members of the public were never in any danger. Thirst satisfied, Kombucha was tranquilised and returned to his enclosure.
Fundamentally, check your logs.
That's the lesson to be learned.
That's the lesson to be learned.
Sarah Campbell, BBC News, London Zoo.
One thirsty gorilla there. Now, more on our main news this hour, and as you'd expect with an election where social media is playing such a prominent role, the bloggers have something to write about again. At the second debate, Mr. Trump triggered a Twitter hashtag when he described some of the comments about women as locker room talk. This time round, it was his comments about bad hombres, or men in Spanish.
One of my first acts will be to get all of the drug lords, all of the bad ones. We have some bad people in this country that have to go out. We're going to get them out. We're going to secure the border. And once the border is secured, at a later date, we'll make a determination as to the rest. But we have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
Well, within minutes, the hashtag bad hombres was trending. There was the usual blend of the hashtag and images from pop culture, this one using bad hombres to reference the 1980s comedy The Three Amigos with Steve Martin. Others tweeting that they misheard the word hombre as ombre with an O, a hair colouring style that gradually goes from dark at the roots to light at the tips, and posted pictures of the technique, which had gone completely wrong. There were the few Trump supporters who did try their best and reclaim the hashtag by turning it against Hillary Clinton to air their criticisms of her policies. Well, let's update you on where the latest BBC poll of polls stands. This is how it's developed over the last month, as you can see there. Mrs. Clinton in the Democratic blue has had a consistent lead, but Mr. Trump in the Republican red has been closing that gap in the run-up to Wednesday's debate and was trailing by just 4 points. Well, don't forget, there's much more on our website. Just log on to bbc.com/news. A reminder of our main news this hour. In the last few minutes, the Donald Trump campaign has denied the latest allegation of sexual misconduct made against him. This woman, Karina Virginia, said he molested her in front of a group of men at the US Tennis Open in 1998. But Mr. Trump's team have now said this was just another coordinated publicity-seeking attack, with the Clinton campaign will stop at nothing to smear Mr. Trump. Give me a break, he said. Voters are tired of these circus-like antics and reject these fictional stories and the clear efforts to benefit Hillary Clinton. That's it from me and the team. Thank you for being with BBC World News Today.